You're listening to Sarah Hagan Backstage, with interviews and insights from years inside the music industry. Join Sarah as she talks with masters of their crafts, finding out what makes them tick, both inside and outside of the music business.
Welcome to Sarah Hagan Backstage. My guest today, Jimmy Chamberlin, is best known as the drummer in the Smashing Pumpkins and the Jimmy Chamberlin Complex, and he has had a pretty incredible career so far, solidifying his place as a drummer's drummer along the way. Jimmy has some really incredible projects coming up, as well as a fall tour with the Smashing Pumpkins and Jane's Addiction, which I feel like is something we all need right now. So come along with me as I catch up with Jimmy Chamberlin. Jimmy Chamberlin, welcome to the podcast.
Hey, Sarah.
Hey, it's great to see you.
Good to see you and good to be seen.
Absolutely. Where are you at the moment? It looks like you're in a hotel room.
Always, right? Yeah, I'm in Oklahoma City. So we've been on tour for about 15 days now. Just finished a long run in LA. We did last Tuesday. It's Tuesday now. So last Tuesday we did Stern in the morning, which got awful. It's like you got to be there at 5:30 a.m. to do it because he's in New York, right? So
yes.
We did Stern on Tuesday. We did James Corden on Wednesday. Or Thursday. We did Stern on Wednesday, James Corden on Thursday. We had a show in Santa Barbara on Friday, a show in Redondo Beach on Saturday. Then we flew to Houston for another show on Sunday. And then I flew to Oklahoma City yesterday for a day off, which wasn't really a day off. It was kind of like a connecting flight in Dallas. And I have a show in Oklahoma City tonight, about 8 or 9 more shows, New Orleans, and then I'm home for a few months. But we're doing a writing session late June, so I'm kind of off, not off.
Right. You're home, but not off. That's so great, though. I love it. So I saw that you've had some dates, and how does it feel being back out there? Is it different? Are you experiencing different emotions about it?
I mean, I always try to live in, gratitude when I'm playing. So, but this is kind of another level. I mean, when it's kind of things are taken away from you, you get to see it from a little bit more of an objective vantage point, and really, get a deeper look into the value and the meaning of it. So yeah, I think it's a little special to be out here and to see people being grateful on their own and just being, thankful that they're getting to experience live music again. The crowd's been great. We were in Mexico City for a week. We did 4 shows at the Metropolitan Theater in Mexico City. And that was incredible. The fans down there. In fact, that's our biggest market, believe it or not. So we had a great time. I love Mexico. I love the people. They're so cool. They're so into the music. And again, the gratitude is infectious. So yeah, it was great. And we just announced a big tour later this fall with Jane's Addiction opening. So I'm looking forward to that. In fact, my 3rd show ever with the Smashing Pumpkins was opening for Jane's Addiction. So I kind of got the gig in October, and then Thanksgiving we opened for Jane's Addiction. So I've been friends with those guys since I think November of 1988.
Oh my goodness, that's amazing.
Even though I think some of the guys, like Dave, I think is a year younger than me, or they're like our big brothers, right? So it's so fun to be able to go out with those guys again. We did a thing where we all played Jane Says together. Perry sang, and Perk came in and played steel drum, which was great. And we had a great little band jam.
I love that. I just interviewed Stephen Perkins, and he was mentioning that there was a big tour that would be announced and that they were going out. And he said, it's a band that you love and you're going to be excited, but I can't tell you about it yet. So when that was announced, I was like, yay.
Oh yeah. I can't wait. It's going to be drum battle every night.
Yes. Yeah. It'll feel like old school, old times. Right. That's amazing.
I just love playing with bands that really push us to kind of, deliver every night. I mean, obviously we try to do that, but when it gets personal, then it's a lot more fun,
Yeah, for sure. Yeah. And he's a great guy to drum battle with. Definitely.
Yeah, Perk's great.
And so during the pandemic, what did you find yourself doing? Were you doing, I know you released a record, actually, the Jimmy Chamberlin Complex record in the middle of the pandemic, which I loved. I loved seeing the new music coming out. That was like kind of the savior of that whole time period, was the music that was being created. And just art in general. It felt like a time for people to kind of focus on things they hadn't had time for, or a chance to do. And so I was psyched that you came out with the album.
Yeah, it was kind of an impromptu thing. I mean, I was in LA, and I don't even know what year it was now. I think it was 2017 or maybe 2018. Oh, you know what? It was 2018 because I was at the Village demoing with the Pumpkins for the Rick Rubin session. So,
Mhm.
and then Moeller had just moved to a new house and said, "Hey, can you bring some drums over here and help me shake out the studio?" And I said, "Yeah." So I had a couple days off, and Sean happened to be in town, so we just got the trio together and just spent about 4 or 5 hours just jacking around in his studio, and we recorded everything, and we just kind of wrote some stuff and just some jams, and as we always do, we kind of leave some room for soloists once we have an arrangement. And then Moeller called me after the Shinies tour, and he goes, "Hey, this stuff we recorded is really good. We should think about putting it out." And then, of course, by that time the pandemic had started, and I said, "Well, it's not really finished." He said, "Well, we can get some of our friends to play on it." So we called Shane Ensley, Frank Catalano, Ben Wendell played on it, Adam Benjamin. So we got our A team guys to kind of play on it, and then it kind of became this fully fleshed out thing, and we just released it. And it ended up doing really well. It ended up being really well received, and again, it just started off like I like to do music. It just started off as just, hey, let's just play whatever we feel. So
Mhm.
it was just, it was an exercise in self-expression that just kind of saw the light of day, which is kind of like all my favorite records are kind of like that. But yeah,
Absolutely.
so and then aside from that, during the pandemic, I think the Pumpkins recorded, I think Billy and I recorded like 82 songs. So
Wow.
so we recorded the Sear record, which was 20 songs. And then we had the psychedelic record that we had never recorded. So we recorded drums on that. And then we recorded a Christmas album because we had bought this old Scully tape machine 4-track, and we had the board from the Argo Marcy label downtown Chicago. We had bought the board that some of those great Buddy Rich records were recorded on. So we
Wow.
recorded through that board to the 4-track tape machine in mono, and we're going to make a Christmas record out of that. And then we started working on what became the 33-song follow-up to Melancholy, and then we recorded the drums for that in March of last year at Blackbird. So we spent about 20 days doing that. So we ended up just working. I mean, Billy and I live pretty close to each other. We're pretty much neighbors. So it
Mhm.
takes about 10 minutes to get to his house. So I have a studio at my house. He has a studio at his house. So it's easy for us to just kind of, hey, what are you doing? Right.
Yeah, that's great. That's so great. I love that.
Yeah.
Just we
Oh,
knock on each other's door. "Hey, can you play?" Right?
and I spent the time kind of, I had connected with Steve Lyman
Mhm.
via Instagram, and he's a big fan, and I'm a big fan of his playing. So he came to my house, and we started doing drum lessons where he was bringing kind of his John Riley and Ari Honig independent stuff to me, and I was kind of showing him what I was on about. So it was a great collaborative lesson. We've done about 3 or 4 of them now, but mostly his stuff is rooted in kind of jazz independence,
Mhm.
our, one finger snap Tony stuff. And then
Right.
I was teaching him more about kind of rock composition and those types of things, and narrative and those types of things. So it's been a great kind of symbiotic relationship. We've become really good friends. And it's been great for me to just work on my kind of jazz chops with a master like him.
Yeah, that's amazing. I love to hear that. I feel like this community of drummers is so supportive of each other, and to hear about that kind of collaboration and that just sharing of information in order for like the greater good. I love that. I love those stories.
Yeah, and I love like even the Pumpkins, like we're not about like this kind of stagnation or just kind of making your second record over and over again.
Mm-hmm.
It was demonstrated by our output, but it's the same for me as a drummer. Like I have a quartet. I play with Frank Catalano in Chicago. It's a kind of a straight ahead quartet. And I love that type of drumming. I just want to get better and better at it. So having access to, him or, Erskine or any of these other guys, like I'm always just, shamelessly tapping into my network of friends to try to get more information or like, that type of stuff, or just stuff to work on. I mean, that independent stuff is like, he worked on this stuff with John Riley for a year where they just studied like Tony Williams' right hand for like a year, right? Or they just worked on one finger snap for like a year. So being able to dedicate myself to these kind of long arcs of practice, it's really kind of what keeps me sane, right? It's
yeah, that's pretty amazing. And I did talk to so many. I've talked to so many players who said the same thing. Like the quarantine time was a chance to go back and explore, just shedding again, or trying to figure out concepts that they hadn't explored yet. And a part of it was because there just hadn't been the time to really dedicate to something like that. And that was one thing that the quarantine and the whole pandemic did give us, was a little bit more time to focus on things that maybe we hadn't been able to before. So
well, yeah, I think once you're in the mix, it's rare that time slows down like that, and you have the gift of 18 months to just kind of go shed or work on some new concepts, or just, I started playing double bass drum pedal, which was fun. I got into that. I was always terrible at it. So I thought, okay, I just started going through stick control with my feet and working on that. And I'm starting to get pretty decent at it. So, just stuff like that, where you just, in the midst of the fray, you just don't have the time to kind of like, bite off these huge chunks of like practice that's outside of the parameters of what you do for your gig. Right. So for me, I just felt like it would be responsible to take advantage of it. I also started working with this guy, Rich Stitzel, who does this thing called Drum Mantra in Chicago.
Okay.
Rich is I think he's a third generation jazz educator. I think, if I'm not mistaken, his grandfather started the jazz program at North Texas State. So he's pretty full tilt. And he's developed this kind of pedagogical concept called the drum mantra, that's rooted in these kind of practice sessions. And he wrote a book on it. He also does a master class at like Dan Weiss has done it. Steve's done it. I did it. Ed Self did it last, which was amazing. So I did that. I did one of those master classes, and then Rich happens to be another neighbor of mine, which I didn't know. So he's been coming to my house, and we've been exchanging ideas. So it's been great. I mean, the pandemic, from a standpoint of like expanding your ability to self-express, has been pretty remarkable. Just because, like I said, you don't really get, here's a gift of 18 months to just kind of go and figure shit out.
Right. And to be home and able to kind of like just be in one space, right? Like that's a foreign concept.
Well, yeah. And, as you know, you have two kids and I have two kids. So it's like being home can allow you to, figure other things out. Like, how much do you like your dog, really? Or like, or do you ever want to get another dog?
Right. We did get a dog. We got a dog in the midst of all of this as well.
We have 2 dogs and 5 cats, so we have a lot of kind of.
Oh my gosh! And your cats are really interesting too. You have like, are they Siamese cats that you have?
They're Oriental short hairs.
Okay.
Yeah, they're
amazing. I love when you post about them. I'm like, oh my gosh, these are the most interesting looking cats.
They're super cool. So their pedigree is, they're related to, well, they are from the cattery called Hobby Cats, and HOBBI, I think KATS. And it's Lori Ken Herbig, who are these incredible breeders from New York. But their cats have they have more followers than I think the Pumpkins on Instagram. They have like 500,000 followers. But So our cats, Merlin and Tamsin and Kenobi and Pee-wee are all they're all descendants of the original Hobby Cats, which makes them very special.
They are very, I can tell just by the photos, I can tell they're very special. They're great. Yeah, so you got to be home. You got to be home with the dogs and the cats, and again, reassess your life choices and
Right.
and
Of
shed
course.
a lot, And I love that you grew up, so people know you from playing with the Smashing Pumpkins and rock music, but you grew up listening to jazz and playing jazz and studying jazz, of course, and rock, right, too. You were into classic rock.
Well, I was the youngest of six, so it was really not a choice. So until I had my own record player, I was just into whatever my brothers and sisters were playing. But I was fortunate in that my older brother Paul was a drummer who was very influential on me. My sister Laura had an incredible taste in music, and she's funnily enough the one that turned me on to like Steve Gadd and Jim Gordon. She was a huge Steely Dan fan, big Joni Mitchell fan, Ricky Lee Jones, Mose Allison. Thad Jones and Mel Lewis. I mean, she had an incredible palette of music in her bedroom that she would just grab me and say, "Hey, come listen to this Jim Gordon track and listen what he's on the ride cymbal." I mean, she had a really uncanny sense of like what a great drummer was. So her room was really kind of where I spent a lot of my time, either listening to that type of stuff or Hendrix or whatever. But the root of it really was my dad. My dad played clarinet, so my dad kind of commandeered the stereo a lot. So there's a lot of Benny Goodman, Pete Fountain, Artie Shaw, Duke Ellington, Count Basie. So my earliest experience with the drums was probably Krupa, and then maybe Sonny Greer and Papa Joe and those types of things. But I never really played a lot of jazz as a kid. My first teacher was Charlie Adams, as you know, who played with Yanni, who was very much kind of a progressive rock drummer. My second teacher, Jerry Droughton, was a big band guy, so I learned a lot of stuff from him. And then my third teacher was actually a timpanist who had studied quite a bit of Brazilian stuff. So I got into that for a couple of years. But by the time I was 15, I was already playing. I started playing polka in Chicago because that's kind of what you did. I played on a polka TV show, which really, polka drumming kind of gets a bad rap. But for the places you play and the kind of dexterity it demands to play, it's a lot like swing. It's a lot like bop, right? In that it's very articulate and you have to play very quietly. So I still feel that was a really big part of kind of my dynamic approach to drums, was being able to play articulate and quiet in small rooms where there was no amplification, right? Just a bass and an accordion. And then from there, I just started working. So I didn't graduate high school. I just started working as a drummer, and that's kind of what I've been doing ever since.
That is amazing. And I think I read I read somewhere that you went off and started your professional drumming career at age 15, which is so unique and kind of incredible that you knew what you wanted to do back then and you just jumped into it. And we talked a little bit before I pressed record today just about kids and fostering their creativity, and it's just amazing that like you had that drive from such a young age.
Yeah, I mean, I feel really fortunate that I kind of always knew what I wanted to do. Like from the first time I sat down at a drum set, and would play my brother's drum kit when he wasn't home because he would come home and yell at me for playing his drum set. And then when he realized that I wasn't going to stop playing it, he suggested getting some lessons, and I started to build my own kit. But yeah, I mean, I know a lot of people that really just don't dig their jobs and are just still like waiting to retire and trying to. I did this thing. And being a professional drummer or semi-professional wasn't always a successful endeavor. I mean, I took a break for a while, right before I joined the Pumpkins, because I wasn't making enough money. I started working construction and playing at night. Just kind of the bottom fell out for a while. So it was a lot of kind of trial and error economically. But by the time I was like 17, 18, I joined a band called JP and the Cats that was playing like 30 dates a month. I was making like $60 a date, $60, $70 a date, which is good money. I mean, if you could make, $3,000 a month, you were doing great. I mean, back in 1980, 81 or 82, I'm 57 now. So it was quite a while ago, but the time that I joined the Pumpkins till the Pumpkins started making money, that was really like 4 years where, I mean, I was working at a bike shop. I was teaching drum lessons at above some nightclub and just trying to make enough money to like buy food, thinking that like I had enough. I knew that like if I didn't join the band, I was going to regret it my whole life, right? It was kind of my one shot to be with an original music band where I loved Billy. I loved the band. Billy loved my playing. He allowed me to come in. Like when I first joined the band, it was really about kind of more 2/4, almost like power pop stuff. And then once Corgan realized kind of what kind of drummer I was, and he started to expose himself as this kind of closet Mahavishnu fan, that's when we started writing the stuff that became our first record, Gish. And he's always just encouraged me to kind of be who I am, right? So, I mean, I had a Banana Yellow Gretsch kit because I was a big Tony fan. So, I mean, I figured like if I can be in a band where I can just play like Tony and we have a chance at making it, like I'd be dumb to just not roll the dice and go all the way, right? So, and that's, still how I feel about the band, that I really just, the band is a vehicle that just allows me to be myself. Rarely talk about like drum parts or music. Like even on the 33-song record, we had gone in and talked about the narrative and the story and the destination of every song emotionally. And then Billy just dumped the whole thing in my lap. And I spent like 2 months just working out drum parts. And when I'd call him and say like, hey, do you want me to send you like what I'm working on? He's like, nah, I'm sure you got it. Right. So I showed up at Black. We hadn't even heard any of the drum parts and we were just kind of good to go. So, I think if you get into a situation like that where, the person you're working with has extreme confidence in your ability to self-express in a responsible and a congruent way, then that's what we're all after, right? Even as small, you have babies, right? Like when you see a baby on the floor, like their first goal is just to be understood more clearly, right? They want to be understood. I want more food, or I want more. I gotta go to sleep. My first bowl, like it's like. So as a musician, I think we're very much like babies in that respect. That our goal is just to be understood more clearly, which is why we practice, because we want to develop a broader skill set of languaging that allows us to articulate things on a deeper level as we kind of move through this journey. And that's kind of what this vehicle has allowed me to do. And then the other side of it is it's really allowed me the freedom to kind of go and tap into my jazzier side and really explore this kind of other uncharted territory that as we get kind of cloistered in our gigs, oftentimes like jazz guys don't get a lot of time to play rock and roll guys don't get a lot of time to go play, straight ahead stuff. But I've been lucky to be able to play like Green Miller, Iridium, and play with some great jazz players and really just kind of branch out.
Absolutely. Yeah. And I love the way you described, what the goal is when you're in a musical situation, just that communication. And I think it's so incredibly important because you have this inside of you that you're trying to get out. And the main goal is to have other people like understand and appreciate what you're putting out there.
Yeah. And if everybody understands, the architecture of the story you're trying to tell, like this is what we talk about in the Pumpkins a lot, is really like, what's the story we're trying to tell and where do we want to land? Because, Billy's he's a great storyteller. And for me, like I've realized over the years, like if I'm in on the joke and I understand the story and I know where the narrative is and what the destination of the song is, it just allows me to make better choices, right? I'm not going to sprinkle fairy dust over like a sad part of the song. And I'm not going to be like morose over something that's supposed to be, a joyful expression. So I think if when you listen to Love Supreme, you hear four people that understand on a deep level the destination of the song, and they're all saying the prayer congruently together, right? So that's really what I think music at its best is, when we're all rowing the boat to the same point in the ocean.
Right. Right. And then with the Jimmy Chamberlin complex, it allows you to express in a totally different way. Right.
Yeah,
Like,
that's my like anything goes. But again, the first record that Moeller and I wrote for that band, it was very much rooted in an understanding of what the destination was. Really, we wanted to put a stake in the ground that allowed us to cast a wide net. So then the second record was more of a straight ahead, an afternoon spent with friends, straight ahead, the parable. And then the last record, again, was just an afternoon spent with friends. So as we get kind of more into it, that's kind of what we like about it, is that, it can be whatever we want it to be, right? If we want it to be like, we're talking about doing a heavy metal record now for the next Complex record, and really getting into, like, there's this great soundtrack that my daughter listens to called Guilty Gear. It's a soundtrack for a video game.
okay.
That's each song is the theme song for a character in the game, and it's incredible music, right? Really well done, kind of modern, postmodern metal. And we're kind of checking that as a template for the next Complex record, which will be, that's an example of something that's kind of premeditated by choice, right? So you're choosing to premeditate a record and saying, okay, we want to make this kind of record. But the other side of that is, like, we don't premeditate anything. We just get together and see kind of what happens when we start playing, and that's kind of what it is. And I think each exercise has equal value. It's just going in with the knowledge of kind of what you want to achieve, that creates the architecture for it.
Absolutely. Wow. Well, I'm excited for that album. That's going to be great.
I know. I am too. We're trying to get, like, I'm racking my brain to think, like, who's going to play. I think I'm going to call, like, Chris Poland, who I've played with before, and I know he's played with Frank and I in the quartet. We did a thing with Percy Jones from Brand X and Chris Poland called the Love Supreme Collective, where we did kind of an homage to Love Supreme, but more in like a fusion way. And Chris played on that. It was amazing. So he's an amazing metal guitar player. I think he would come in and really do a nice job on this. He doesn't know about it yet, so maybe he'll find out through the podcast.
Yeah, surprise.
Hey, man, I heard you were talking about me.
That's so great, though. And, like, like you said, you've been working on your double bass stuff, and that'll be so much fun. I like that. I'm interested to hear when that comes out. That's great. And so I just am curious how things have changed over the years. You've done so much touring between the bands that you've been in and everything. How it has, like, I see it from a perspective of going to shows and spending time with musicians, but it feels like the tour life has changed a lot. And then also, like, as we've gotten older, like the daily activities have changed, the a lot of the backstage, drinks have been replaced by, like, a smoothie machine and things like that. So
smoothies, right? Yeah.
There you go.
Yeah. So 100%, right? So, I guess most people know, but maybe they don't. So when I got married, so my wife and I just celebrated our 20th anniversary, right? So 20 years married. I love,
Congratulations.
I love being married. It's the greatest thing ever. So when our daughter was born, Audrey, so we both quit drinking, both quit everything, right? So I've been, this kind of quasi sober guy for 20 years, 19 years. So that's really that was kind of the start of this kind of health crusade for me. And obviously, taking your health more responsibly had an impact on my drumming. And, like, for me, my relationship with my instrument is the oldest relationship I have. My parents are dead. I don't really talk to my brothers and sisters that much. I'm the youngest of 6, so there's a lot of, like, I don't go into swimming pools, because when I did, I used to my brothers would just try to drown me, right? Like, there's, like, when you're the youngest kid, it's like you get a lot of downs, right? So
yeah.
And it's still like, they don't take me seriously. I go to breakfast with them. They talk over me. They interrupt me still. They still think I'm like, 8 years old.
The little kid. Yeah.
But I'm joking, of course. I love my family, but my relationship with my drum kit is like the oldest I have. So every time I've done something for my health, including kind of quit drinking, I've been a vegan now for 3 years. I started seeing a doctor. I started lifting, like deadlifting and pressing and doing like these exercises.
Mm-hmm.
And everything I do, it just impacts my drumming in such a positive way that like I can't go back, right? It's like knowing that this stuff makes you like a better drummer, and your time is more holographic, and things are more lucid. Like that's really the impetus for this kind of health crusade that I've been on. I mean, obviously I want to be around for my grandkids and all that stuff, and all that cliche stuff, but really for me, it's like being a vegan was an eye opener. And like when we recorded the Sear record, we had 20 songs to record, and it was the first record we ever recorded to click, right? Pumpkins always recorded drums, no click, straight to tape. And like Corgan would pick the best drum performance that he wanted, right? So whether it dragged or sped up or whatever, he would be like, this one's got what I'm looking for, the vibe, right? And sometimes I would be like, oh my God, no, right? Sometimes I'd be like, great, right? But I just lived with it because I trusted him, and it seemed to have worked out, right? So this record we recorded to click because we were going to do some sound replacement. So, I worked on it at home a little bit, and we blocked out about 20 days to record the drums, which is a song a day with, some figuring we would get 2 some days and maybe 3, and then have some time to do some rearranging. I had gone vegan like 6 months before the recording session. I went in and tracked all the drums in 6 days. And I was like, wow, this is crazy that this happened so fast. And Corgan was like, dude, what's going on? He's like, your time is so much better. It's like you're able to like pull verses back and push choruses ahead of the time, and it doesn't sound wonky. And I said, I don't know, but like taking all the fat and inflammation out of my system just helped with like the fine motor part of like neuroplasticity and all that stuff. So believe me, I wanted to go back to eating like sausage pizza and that stuff, but I couldn't deny what it did for my drumming. So I just kind of kept at it. Now it's been 3 years, and I feel like I'm way healthier. I feel way better. I lost a bunch of weight. I'm way more alert. I'm way more lucid. And it just works for me. So yeah, in that regard, I think, we get to, again, it's like ownership, and like what is it you want to define you, right? And for me, it's not even the drums so much. It's like my accountability to my covenant with myself, right? And that's really like, especially raising kids, because that's like the environment you want them to be exposed to. Not that I'm like, and in the past when I was drinking and like doing drugs and stuff, it was really more a byproduct of just my OCD nature, right? I'm just like OCD. So anything I do, whether like I race cars for 2 years, I ride motorcycles, like I do all this crazy like rock climbing stuff, and that's more rooted in kind of that past like OCD stuff. That's not the same as like an internal covenant where you just like, you made a deal with yourself and you're just going to kind of stick to it. There's a real empowerment, I think, in that kind of keeping true to that. That's infectious, right? And if you can do it, at least for me, if you can do it for long enough, it doesn't become about like, can I do it? It becomes more about like, what am I going to feel like if I don't do it, right?
Right.
So
yes.
So I've kind of gotten over that line where now it's like, now I'm kind of screwed, right? I can't go back. Muck, right?
Yeah. And I understand that 100%. I think when you start like really focusing on your health and feeling better, you have more control over yourself. Like in all ways, you have, like you were talking about with the timing and all of that. I feel personally, when I'm in the best shape I can be, I feel like I have control over my limbs and everything that I'm doing. Everything's working together. Like it feels cohesive. And then you're right, because you feel so good that you're like, I don't really want to feel bad like that. When I eat that, I don't feel great. Or when I drink that, I don't feel my best. Or, that kind of thing. I think it, it is one of those things where then you kind of consciously make the choice to keep feeling better, keep feeling
Yeah.
good.
Yeah. And, for me, I mean, and other people don't have the issues that I had. I mean, obviously, you can read about my mistakes on Wiki, and my kids can read about it. So it gives me credibility in that space for sure.
Mhm.
But for me, like having burned it all down and kind of gone and, risen from the ashes to the best of my ability, when I got married, I was still at the kind of at the end of that kind of using and abusing rope. And it just occurred to me that like, that stuff, like the most punk rock thing that I could have done at that point, having done all that other stuff, was really get married and quit drinking, right? And raise. I was like, that was really like, that was the last box to check, right? There was all that. I'd done everything else, like wrecked cars, fucking crashing into cop cars. I mean, I had done like just the worst of the worst. I mean, there was, drugs, alcohol, got fired from my band, got
Mhm.
humiliated publicly. I mean, it was like the only thing to do was really like to have this like suburban, like everyman experience, which like it just turned out to be fun. And like, I'm into
Yes.
it. And then you
Yeah.
add kids to the mix and, pets and everything else. And you're like, oh, I really don't have time to go be a knucklehead anymore.
Right. Yeah. You're responsible to other people
Right.
for sure. And
It's
other pets, right?
right. I didn't want to get married, and my wife somehow talked me into it, thankfully. And I ended up doing it. I was like, "Ah, this is going to be a debacle, right? Like the rest of this stuff in my life, this is going to be a disaster, right?" And it ended up just working out. So I'm thankful every day for, what has transpired, and really, and it's really impacted my journey as a musician in the best possible way. I mean, I've got to be like friends and refriends with so many people. I chased Peter Erskine around Europe the last time we were there. He was playing, he was playing with Kenny Warner and those guys. Like Pete and I are really good friends. I mean, I've gotten to be friends with so many great musicians that, I mean, Damian Reed was playing at Corden the other night, and he came up. He's a big fan, and then he came to the show in Redondo, and
Oh, nice.
I was just like, "That's so cool that these like Carter McLean." I mean, like, there's so many great drummers that just come out and hang.
Mhm.
Drums aren't like guitar. It's a real brotherhood, and
Yeah.
like Gary, I went to see him the other night. But yeah, it's a wonderful family to be part of.
It really is. And I say that on this podcast all the time, but it really is like the most amazing community of people who truly care about each other and are like rooting for each other.
Right.
Um, and I experienced that being a part of it and having, career change and realizing that like all of those people who were my friends were really like
They got
really
your
there for me.
Yeah,
Yeah.
I mean, when you texted me, I'm like, yeah, of course. I mean, it's not, I'm not thinking like, oh, this is going to be a hassle. I'm thinking like, oh, this is going to help like Sarah, who's been a great advocate for all of us. I mean, over these years. So,
Me too.
that's a real good example. And you'll see like that the love will just come kind of, raining down on you. I mean, I did Drummer Fest in like 2004. And it was I had just kind of started doing clinics, and it was a terrifying experience for me. And I ended up getting thrown in this mix it was me, Kenny Aronoff, Terry Bozzio, Greg Bissonette, Thomas Lang. And I'm like, which one of these people doesn't fit in this picture, right? And
Oh, no. No, you were I feel like I was there. Where was
it
this?
was in London.
Oh, okay, no, I was not there,
Yeah,
but
but
I remember that lineup, though. It was a killer lineup, and you deserve to be in that lineup. It's great.
it was so fun. And Terry, Terry was like, he was so nice to me. And he was like, look, nobody can do what you're doing. I can't do it. Thomas can't do it. Kenny can't do it. Obviously, Kenny was in your band. Bozio had auditioned for the Pumpkins when I got fired. So they just really allowed me to see my own personal value and celebrate it in a way that actually, like, I felt like they gave me permission to kind of be okay with what I did for the first time. And playing in front or behind those guys was daunting, but it was also kind of a reconfirmation of kind of where you're at. And I remember like I remember playing at the last day, like 5,000 people drummer fest, and I was on like 3 PM. I was playing some complex tracks, and it was going really well, and I was like really comfortable, and I was having a great day. And then I felt like something, like an energy to my right, and I looked over, and Bill Bruford was just standing there watching me with his arms crossed. And I was like, oh my God, it's Bill Bruford. I was like, and everything. I'm like, oh my God, this is a disaster. I'm like, I can't even think right now. And I finished the song, and Bill was like clapping politely. And I go, Bill, we hadn't even met yet. And I go, Bill, you can't stand there and watch me. This is, I mean, it's bad enough to be up here with these guys, but you like standing there, you got to go. We'll talk later, please.
Yeah.
And he started laughing. And the crowd started laughing. And then we, of course, caught up later. And, but those guys were just the nicest. And now Terry and I are like, we're best friends. I mean, we talk, not all the time, but I see him whenever he's in town. He's been a huge supporter of mine. All those guys, Kenny, Greg, Thomas, they're like brothers, right?
It's amazing.
Right? It's like, and when I was a kid, like I remember like just staring at like drummers, and I met Ralph Humphrey. It's like, I never thought that I would be like even meeting these guys or seeing these guys, let alone being, in the same conversation as those guys. So
absolutely.
That part of it for me is probably the craziest, like pinch yourself. 'Cause I'm still such a huge fanboy.
Yeah, we all are. But you know what? The greatest part is that like they all are too. Like we're all just fans of drumming and music and drummers in general. And I've had that same experience, just having a conversation with someone who Sheila E. is a good example. I grew up, and Sheila was really only one of the very few female drummers out there. And seeing her up on stage and playing with Prince and the glamorous life, and her, the way she dressed and presented herself. And I was just like, she's like the ultimate. And meeting her in person for the first time years back, and she was just like the sweetest, most down-to-earth person. She complimented me on my shirt. She said, oh, I have that shirt in black. And I almost fell over. I was just like, Sheila E. But it's so funny because she is a fan too. Like we're all in the same boat in that way. And I love that, when you see drummers watching other drummers on stage and cheering them on and encouraging, and and then the hangs afterwards, the dinners. Like I don't feel like other musicians all go to dinner like that and just like geek out about gear and technique and all that.
Yeah, or just we're constantly like emailing or texting.
Yeah,
it's a great family, and it's really it's really motivational, right? And it allows you to see that this thing that we're all part of has a ton of value, right? Even as like drumming aside, like just the relationships and the honor and the camaraderie and the self-respect and the respect that it garners is like, that's enough. I mean, the drumming is obviously a huge, net positive, but the friendship and the compassion and the gratitude that kind of permeates the whole network of drumming is really what's so compelling about it. And I think it's really just because drummers know that this thing never ends, right? It just never ends. It doesn't end ever. I mean, look at Roy. I mean, I've sat with Roy Haynes. Roy Haynes has met my wife. My wife has a drum head with Roy Haynes and JR and Russ Miller, and I don't. My wife does, right?
Yes, I love that.
Earl Palmer. I mean,
yeah.
all the and like they know my wife, like Joe Testa was my wife, right? It's like, we know Ken. It's like, there's a huge like family contingency attached to it too. But like looking at Roy and looking at him play, you know that it just never ends because he just gets better and better and better. I mean,
Right.
he gets better. I got that Life and Time box set where his first he's playing with Charlie Parker. I'm like,
Right.
what?
It is amazing. And I do think that like drumming keeps you young. Like there's something about it that just keeps you youthful inside, because it's fun and it it's just I don't know, I think about people like Roy and I think about like all the greats who just played until the end and and then and you look so great and Kenny Aronoff and everybody like just doesn't age like normal, It's just amazing.
Well, I think as you get older, it's just like Kenny, Kenny's extremely healthy. Kenny's one of my best friends. I mean, whenever he's in town and I'm playing, he always comes to see me. I always go to see him. I mean, we're like, I get my, on my iPhone, I get pictures that flash up, on your, like this day and, whatever year.
The memories. Yeah.
Like Kenny and I were just in a drummer's embrace at one of his Bodine's gigs. And he had come to see me play a jazz gig the night before. And I remember my brother was there. And my brother was like, "Oh my God, that's Kenny Aronoff." And I was like, "No, that's just Kenny Aronoff." Because he's just Kenny, right? He's just like, hey, sit down and talk to anybody. And
yes, yeah. And there is nothing like a Kenny Aronoff embrace. I'll have to say that. There's nothing in the world like that.
Yeah, he's the best. In fact, he was he really, when we were doing Drummer Fest, Terry was doing, I think, he was doing Phantomas, I think, with Mike Patton. Yeah. And he had this binder full of sheet music for the charts for the gig. And it was all the crazy it was like a Zappa chart, right?
It was crazy, yeah.
And all this kind of metric modulation and 13/4, like all this crazy shit. And Kenny came over and just kind of off the cuff sight sang one of the pages. And we were like, "Oh yeah, you're Kenny here now." We were like, holy shit. It blew our minds. But then we remembered, like, Indiana State. I mean, he's that guy. Like he was
That's what he does, right?
He knows how to read, right? But
it's amazing.
Super guy, man. So talented.
Yeah. But this industry is just it is the best. I pinch myself all the time too, thinking like, this is real. Like it's just amazing. And you're right, it just goes on. And the next generation.
I love going to like Drum Channel, right? Or like, even though I'm not a DW guy, I like just go hang with Don Lombardi all day and like just see who pops in, right? Last time I was there, it was Joe Porcaro was there before he passed, and Ralph Humphrey was there, and Kenny Terry was there, and we just sat around. And Don had these Buddy Rich tapes where they had isolated the drums. So we listened to like Love for Sale, just the bass drum. Just all huddled around in Don's office, just listening to the bass drum track for Love for Sale. I'm like, who the hell else is doing this stuff?
Right. That's amazing. That's amazing. And it's universal. Like this is how we are. We're all a little bit crazy like that. So it's so great. And I was just going to ask you about, the next generation kind of coming up. You mentioned the music that your daughter was listening to, the metal music. And are you hearing, I mean, I always ask like my cousins and my friends' kids who are like in their teens, what they're listening to at the moment. Is there anything that you've heard recently that you're like, yeah, that's like the next thing?
I mean, honestly, the Guilty Gear soundtrack is really amazing. The drumming is it's like fusion drumming in a metal rock context in the best possible way, because it's a video game soundtrack, it kind of gets a free pass in how derivative it can be, right? So there's I think the guy who wrote it, and I can't think of his name right now. I think he's a Japanese guy that lived in South Africa, guitar player. but he wrote a song called Zappa. He wrote a song called Slayer. So you can see like some of the songs are homages in a
Yes.
derivative way, but in the best possible way. So I think that stuff is really cool. My daughter's listening to a lot of like Japanese Vocaloid stuff, where the vocals are comprised of a phonetically recorded vocal database. So it's just a singer recording consonants and vowels, and then you can assemble lyrics by putting those components together, which is interesting.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, as far as drumming goes, I mean, I'm on, Instagram looking at guys who could, wipe the floor with me, who are 18, 19. I mean, there's just so much talent out there. I mean, it's incredible. Like, I was telling my doctor, like, my doctor's into this age reversal protocol and like hormoning and like peptides and all this stuff to kind of lengthen the telomeres that increase your age. And I was just telling him, like, what does drumming sound like if people can live to 120, right? What does drumming start to sound like if people can live that? And obviously Roy is probably the closest thing we've got to that, like
Right.
where it's trying to get to. But if you can have a life of 120 years and you start playing when you're 10, like, where does drumming get to with all the resources that are available to us? It gets into, obviously, Virgil Donati territory very early.
Yes.
Which, who knows? But I think what's most evident to me when I listen to drummers, and what's different about how I learn and kind of how Terry learned, like, we learn by hearing stuff, right? Like, we learn by putting a needle on a record and trying to figure out kind of what John Bonham was doing or what Buddy was doing, or Alvin. And by that, we kind of developed our own version of those phrases, right? And I think what we were after, like when I heard Tony, like Lifetime, and then went back and researched his earlier drumming, but it was the emotional content of what he was doing that we were trying to replicate, right?
Mm-hmm.
And I think it took us a long time to catch up mechanically to what Tony was doing with the flam stuff and obviously the independence.
Right.
It took us a while to figure that stuff out, whereas now it's almost the opposite, where you can see the mechanics of stuff, and then the hope is that you land in the emotional connectivity later, right? So I think that's the biggest difference I see in drumming, is that it used to be an auditory experience, and now it's more of a visual learning experience. Like, I only saw my teacher once a week. So if I didn't know how to do something, I'd have to wait 6 days or 7 days to see like how to do it. Like, he was a big Bill Bruford guy, so he would teach me like Bruford fills or 5% or nothing, like that groove, or this guy, I think, was the first drum fill he ever wrote in my book. Like, those types of things, we didn't have any visual cues, whereas now you can go back and see kind of what Tony was doing. You can watch it, but you can see, and then kind of figure, and then back the truck into the dock as to kind of, where you're going to make those choices. But I think for me, it being somebody who's really, as a drummer, tries to be subservient to a narrative, it's not really about this kind of Tetris puzzle that sometimes it becomes about today. It's really more about knowing what story I want to tell you, and then taking things off the shelf that will reinforce that narrative and help add dynamic shading around the parts that I want to be sad or happy or whatever, move forward. I think it's a little different now, and I hear things that are incongruent, and I hear things that are way cooler, right? So it's just, I feel like we're at this kind of juncture where drumming is about to launch into this whole other thing, right?
Yeah. Yes. Yeah, I agree with you absolutely. And I also, will look at drummers on Instagram and just be like, oh my goodness, like that is totally crazy, fantastic. But how? Like, and I feel the same way. I grew up also, listening and learning how to play from listening, and we didn't have YouTube and all of that. I think it is so different now, and there's so much about the visual that that it is a focus of like kids making drumming videos now. They're focused on the visual. I'm thinking of there's an Instagram drummer named Al Estapario, and watching his videos. I don't know if you've seen any of his videos, but he will hit the stick on the snare and it flips, and he's not even looking at it, and he's catching it in the midst of this like blistering drum blast, and it's fantastic. I mean, it just blows me away when I see him play. And he's one of those drummers who this is what he does. Like, he's content to be doing, Instagram videos, and he's doing a great job at it, and, making it work for him, which is so great. For me, it's so foreign because I'm just like, I don't even like, same with you. I grew up like pushing the needle back to listen again and try to figure out what that was that just happened, so, but it is amazing how things have transitioned, and they are kind of like being pushed into the future. And like you just mentioned with the, what was it that you said it was, the phonetic sounds that are
Vocaloid.
Amazing. So I need to look into that for sure.
It's pretty wild. Yeah, my daughter's got a Vocaloid interface, and she's been reinterpreting like some of her favorite. Like, she just did a Vocaloid version of "Shake the Disease" by Depeche Mode, which is like super cool. I mean, but creepy way, but a good creepy.
Yeah.
And then, she's kind of an old soul, so she's done, she's had access to my record collection. So when she was like 6, she would just go pick out records. And so, we'd walk by her room and she'd be listening to like Curtis Mayfield or something. Like, we'd be like, oh, what are we doing to this kid? But
that's amazing.
But yeah, it ended up being the best thing that ever happened to her, because in addition to her contemporary stuff that she listens to, she's a big Curtis Mayfield fan. She loves Joni Mitchell, and she loves Carole King. She loves Earth, Wind and Fire. She likes, Crosby, Stills, Nash and Young. And it was funny when she would play a record, like Bowie, right? So when Lori was pregnant with Audrey, she went to see Bowie. I was on tour, and she met Bowie backstage, and Bowie put his hand on Lori's stomach and started talking to Audrey, because we knew it was going to be a girl, right?
Wow.
And then Audrey came out, and she immediately, well, not immediately, but as soon as she was old enough, she kind of gravitated towards Bowie, right? And her and I play guitar, so she plays the ukulele, so we've done Bowie songs together, Space Oddity and stuff. We've learned the chords, and she's got a great voice, so she sings as well. So when she would play records like Hunky Dory or whatever, she would drop the needle and have that kind of 20-minute analog exchange where she'd lay on her bed and look at the album cover for 20 minutes, and then she'd get up and it would be over, right? And when she got older and she got an iPhone and she would wear her earbuds, it became the background music for this other kind of digital experience she was having. It was really weird. Something about the digital versus analog. It became the soundtrack for whatever, cleaning your fish tank or returning email or doing homework, right?
Right.
And I always said, like, if you put the needle on a record, you can't do homework.
Right.
It won't allow you to, because of the constant sine waves in the music. There's no interruption in the file. So it demands your attention. But if you're listening to, whatever she's listening to, Bastille or Imagine Dragons or any of these kind of contemporary artists, she can totally like multitask. So I'm not smart enough or a scientist to know kind of how to figure that out. But I know, like, I'm a big vinyl guy. And when my wife and I sit in front of our stereo and listen to Fela or Miles Davis or whatever we're listening to, like, we have that 20-minute experience. But when we have the iPod playing through the speakers in the house, like we're making dinner or we're just, messing around, it's a different type of listening experience. But
you're so right. Yeah.
But Don Lombardi, we talked a lot about the modern drummer and kind of how they learn. And, Don wanted me to write a book called The Why of Drumming, right? Because right now drummers can learn the how and the what, But sometimes if you ask them why, they don't really have an answer, right? Like, why are you doing that? Like, if you're in the midst of a song and you play some crazy drum fill that fits, and the answer is because it fits and it's cool and I can do it, but it doesn't have anything to do with the story, then, you know, that's where it kind of loses me. Not to be kind of old and curmudgeon-y, but I grew up on very impassioned music, whether like Ornette Coleman or, you know, Coltrane or, you know, that Mickey, obviously Lee Morgan, stuff that really had an emotional destination. The emotional destination of the song reigned supreme, and the soloing was subservient to the place on the map where they needed to get to, right?
Right.
Which oftentimes in kind of the drumming we're talking about now, it's a bit of a head scratcher. And if the destination is like, it's cool, or I want to be a YouTube star, then that for me is enough. And that's congruent with the proper narrative. But sometimes it gets to be, you know, a license to kind of, you know, drive over the speed limit, or, you know, those types of things. Not to bag on it, because I mean, I'm no one is more impressed or appreciative of the mastery of the technique than you know, us drummers. But as drummers, that's kind of what we do at home. You know, we work on, you know, swung eighth notes over a swing pattern, right? But we don't necessarily play that all like through night and day, or, you know, those types of songs, or Fly Me to the Moon, or whatever standard you're playing.
Right.
But you need to have those things in your toolbox to articulate a narrative within the context of another narrative, right? Or a deeper understanding of that narrative. So that's where like the practicing becomes just another vehicle to be understood more clearly, not to kind of demonstrate that I can play this kind of interstellar like passage over this swing feel, which is in the privacy of my own home. Yeah, I mean, I listen to that stuff all day long. I mean, but you know, Brand X, you know, those types of things, that was the destination for that stuff.
Right.
I remember listening to Weather Report and thinking like, oh my God, you can play like this?
Yes.
And you paid? I'm in, right?
I love that. But I do like that concept though for a book, because it does, yeah. I mean, and I feel like that's been a theme of our conversation, is like why, what's the story behind it, right? Why are you choosing to go this way musically? What is the meaning behind it? And then the connection to the audience, you know?
Well, there's a lot of musicians historically that have done that stuff successfully. Like whether you're talking about Bill Frisell or Joe Pass or Paul Motian, you know, there's tons of guys that have gotten away with that stuff because they understood at a deep level how to convey, like Bill Evans, how the conveyance of those types of emotions in an extremely sophisticated, multi-tangential, multi-layered self-expression.
Right.
When you listen to late versions of Bill Evans playing Nardis, you know, with Joe LaBarbera and I forget who the bass player was. The last bass player was. It's just amazing, right? Where he got to with that song.
Yeah.
I mean, that last concert in Germany or wherever he is, you can watch it on YouTube. It's absolutely amazing. I think it's Marty Burrell is playing drums on that, but it's absolutely amazing where he got to with that song, with just the architecture of that song and the sophistication of the self-expression. But the destination kind of remained the same, right? You still got to the same place as he did in the 60s when he did that. It was just denser, right? There was just it's the difference between like walking down a street of newly planted trees and understanding the beauty of that, and then walking down 20 years and seeing these massive oak trees that have grown, you know, 40 feet, and having the same, you're getting to the same place, but the environment has changed. It's become a deeper imagery of the journey and the destination. And that's really when I look at musicians, that's what I feel like. Like I saw their gardens very early on, and now their gardens are like completely fertilized and had like the perfect growing seasons, and like you're experiencing the full breadth and weight of their experiences that to me is when like music is at its best.
I love that analogy. That's beautiful. Absolutely beautiful. And I see it and totally understand what you're saying. So great.
Yeah, I mean,
Um,
and that's kind of what a metaphor for what at least I feel like should be
mhm,
going on. Right? Like we don't need to walk different paths all the time, but we have to understand that the path we are walking can become deeper and richer and more sophisticated as we become cleverer and more articulate in our ability to convey what we're trying to tell.
mhm, absolutely. Yeah, and I've loved watching your musical journey too. I mean, I just to bring it back to you, I met you, I wanna say probably 2004 or so. You were playing with Jimmy Chamberlain, Complex, and you were in Boston at the Paradise, and
Yeah.
I only knew you from Smashing Pumpkins, like, that's the style that I had in my head, and, so I went to see you play, and I was just blown away. I was like, there's a whole other, like, dimension happening right now, so that
I remember Terry saw that band and he came up to me and he goes, "Dude, you just played Fred."
Oh my goodness. Yeah.
I was like, "Did I really play it or did I kind of play it?"
Yeah, I love that. That's amazing. Yeah, I mean, really, like, it was like, "Oh my gosh, I didn't know." Like, I had no idea, and it just, yeah, it just blew me away, and again, like, gave me a whole other layer of thought to, like, you and your playing, and, that's only continued, and I've seen you do drum clinics and all of that throughout the years. It's just so great. I just can't wait to see what comes next, and the thought of the metal record and more Smashing Pumpkins and more touring, and I think you guys come through Boston, on the tour in the fall, so
We
hopefully
do,
we'll
yeah.
get to we'll get to see each other in person, and I'm excited for everything that you have coming up.
Yeah, me too. I think it's really kind of a fun time, and I think the pandemic, as kind of awful as it was, has given everybody a new appreciation for what they had and what I mean, look, I think as you get older, or maybe some are lucky to figure this out when they're younger, but at some point in your life, and maybe kids have something to do with it, you realize that like the most valuable thing you have is your time, right? And
Mhm.
no money or Ferraris or Porsches and all this other accoutrements of life are going to substitute for the value of your time and how your time is spent.
Yes.
So that's really like that's my mantra these days, is that I really know or want to know that or keep in mind that the most valuable thing is my time and how I want to spend it. And it changes, right? It's not always like I want to be doing this or I want to be doing that. It's in flux a lot. But I do, I am in service to the value of my time and how I want to spend it. And I really did enjoy or am enjoying like continuing to learn with Steve Lyman, who's an incredible educator, and Rich Stitzel, and anybody, I mean, that I can get my hands on. I'm like, how do you do this, right? Like, uh,
Yeah.
me on, we played together on the Corden show the other day, and we talked a lot about drumming, and it's like that stuff is like it's super valuable, right? And I feel like when I'm having those conversations with people that are great, it's the best use of my time.
Yes. Yeah, I love that,
Yeah.
and also, they're excited to do it too, you know what I mean? Like Peter, you mentioned Peter Erskine, he's more than happy to talk about, technique and theory and all those things, like, that's his love too, and I love that,
I've learned so much from him. I
yeah.
mean, just not even about drumming, right? Just about kids and
Oh,
being,
yeah.
I mean, I've been a fan of his since I mean, forever. I mean,
Mhm.
I don't want to date him, but I mean, geez, I was a Weather Report fan. My sister turned me on to heavy weather. I remember meeting Alex Acuna and like like almost hyperventilating, right? And I was at Lombardi's office as well. I was like, oh my God, like I can't, we would have to sit here for 3 days for me to tell you like my story about listening to you, right? Listening to a remark you made and those songs that were so influential. I mean, the drum pattern in Tonight is an homage to Birdland. I mean, the whole open hat clave thing is really like, that's where that came from. I mean, that's like, when I heard that, I was like, that is such an incredible way to put a verse over. So, I've been a fan of that stuff for so long, but I've got an email from Peter from about, God, probably 20 years ago. It's one of my most prized possessions, where he emails me and says, hey, I got a student that's asking me about your drumming and this one part that you did. Can you tell me how you did this one thing? And I was like, oh my God, are you kidding me?
I love that. I love that. And that's what I mean too. Like that's Peter. Like he's he wants to know as well. He's a fan of all music as well. And I also have an email from Peter that's one of my prized possessions. And he just Peter doesn't mince words, right? He says what he thinks and what he means always. And so I think when Peter graces you with a sincere compliment about something, it is even more meaningful, and he's just one of those people that his words have so much weight to them. And so I understand why you would keep that email.
In fact, the first time I did PASIC, I had the unfortunate experience of having to play after Peter and after Tommy Igo, because pumpkins were huge, right? And it was like, and it was so the night before, and this is like 1999, so I was still partying a little bit. So Peter and Freddie Gruber and I think Billy Ward, a couple other drummers, all went out and maybe indulged a little bit too much. And then the next day, Peter had Mike Marinari on vibes and played like this incredible version of like Kind of Blue, and so relaxed. And then as I'm watching him, my palms are starting to sweat, and I'm thinking like, I gotta go up and follow this with like my ham-fisted fusion drumming attempt, right? And I remember Peter, when I was doing my thing, Peter just came and sat in the front row and just kind of sat there with his arms crossed and watched my whole thing. And, you're basically, when he's in the audience, you're just playing for Peter, right? There's nobody else there. I'm just like, okay, what did Pete think? Like, oh, he just blinked. Did he like that?
What did that mean?
It was a disaster, right? I mean, I sounded okay. And Pete was like, yeah, that was pretty good. You looked a little nervous, but it was pretty good. But then I realized the lesson was like, don't go out with Peter the night before. Don't go out with Peter and Freddie when this is your first clinic ever, right? Because they're going to teach you a lesson. It's not about drumming, right?
Right. Well, all the life lessons. I love that.
At 9 o'clock.
That's so great. That's so great. Yeah. Well, I want to thank you so much, Jimmy. I really appreciate you spending some time with me today. And the fact that, I texted you and I just said, hey, I would love to have you on the podcast. Let me know. And you texted me back and I think you just said, yes, when, so I just so appreciate that. And your willingness to spend some time. And I know you're on the road and, it just means a lot to me. So thank you so much.
Sure. It's my pleasure. It's so fun to talk drums, and anytime. So if you need anything else, just hit me up. You got my number.
Absolutely. I would do that. And I'll look forward to seeing all the great things you have coming up and seeing you in person when you come through Boston.
Yeah, hit me up when you come through. We got to get some lunch or hang out.
Yes, we'll get some good vegan food for sure.
Sounds good.
Awesome. Thank you so much. You take care. I'll talk to you soon.
Sarah. Okay, bye.
Okay, bye.
Thank you for tuning in today. Join us each Tuesday for new episodes of Sarah Hagan Backstage.